When I was 20 years old, I was a student at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And it was there that I was introduced to many authors that I would soon realize were actually not authors, but oracles. Oracles who would really help me as a young Black woman tap into sacred energy that's ancestral, sacred energy that's healing, sacred energy that's creative energy. I took a class that was taught by Sowini Madison that was a performance studies class, but was really magic. And in that class, she introduced me again to Toni Morrison, Alice Walker, Gloria Naylor, Gwendolyn Brooks. She carved pathways for me to meet Octavia Butler, Alexis Pauline Gumbs, Adrienne Marie Brown, and Jackie Shelton Green. Every time I've been in space with Jackie Shelton Green, she has dropped blessings into my lap like ripe mangoes. And I don't even know what I did to be blessed with her as a friend and a mentor, but I'm so glad I did it. There's spaces that we hold together where she calls forth specters that resembles my own shadow. And she reminds me that I have no choice but to knit myself back together with the medicine that's never left me. It really sits inside of my body and is waiting for release. It's critical. It illuminates. We have to remember that. Jackie is an oracle who lives in spaces, pulls out truths, intertwines narratives, and provides poetry for this life. I feel very blessed to have her in my life, reminding me that that poetry and that creativity and those words heal me and heal my soul. They break those generational curses. They remind me that my ancestral through line is safe and intact. Give thanks for the oracle. My name is Omishade Bernie Scott, and this is the Black Girl's Guide to Surviving Menopause, introducing North Carolina Poet Laureate Jackie Shelton Green. So, Mama Jaki.
Yes, Omishade.
Thank you for agreeing to, do this interview again. So there are some folk who were waiting with bated breath for our first interview. Like, I had put it out. I was like, oh my God, this is going to be the best conversation ever. It was the best conversation ever. And I feel like the universe and the ancestors were like, that was just for y'all.
Yeah, I think the ancestors intervened on that one and said, okay, now what is the public version?
I think that's right.
To protect the innocent.
I think that's right. So we are here for round 2 of the Jackie Omi show. And I want to kick us off with this question because we were literally just talking about a person we have in common, Dr. Lee Green, who was one of my professors at UNC Chapel Hill when I was a student in the 80s. But this is about oracles. So here's the question. Though Lee Green introduced me to Mama Toni Morrison through Bluest Eye, it was Sowini Madison who pulled me through a portal. And so when I think about the oracles who were introduced to me when I was like 19, 20, 21 years old, Toni Morrison, Gloria Naylor, Alice Walker, reintroduced to Gwendolyn Brooks in a different way. We read Maud Martha. I had never heard of Maud Martha before in my entire life. Mary West.
Wow, that's
all these women.
That's when you don't hear it,
Yeah, all these women. And I think about where I'm sitting right now, next to who I consider a personification of an oracle. I wonder who were the oracles that you were introduced to when you were a young woman that let you know that you too were going to walk that path?
Perhaps the most prolific person was Audre Lorde. Alice Walker, Sonia Sanchez. These are the women when I was very, very young I was reading. Nikki Giovanni. All these people I would meet when I was very, very young. I was in total awe of them. But they had already stretched the portal, if I can use that metaphor. They had already stretched that portal and actually validated for so many women of my generation that we were worthy to step inside of that space. And I think that what was happening when I was reading African American literature, but specifically African American women, is I didn't really have a frame of reference for it in the context of my everyday life. And these writers just put a mirror up to my everyday life and showed me that I was living the stories they were writing. And for every character in A Beloved or Bluest Eye, or in the instance of Zora Neale Hurston, I knew those characters. And some of those characters were women around me, women in my family. I remember reading Gloria Naylor's, what was that book? Mama Day.
Mama Day.
And Mama Day, I felt like someone had laced me up in a straitjacket. That was the effect that Mama Day had on me, and Temple of My Familiar.
Yes.
And I remember my cousin, who's a librarian, she was calling me, she said, I know you love this book because it don't make no sense to me. What the hell are all these blank pages? I was like, but that's the story.
Right.
And we weren't comfortable with the blank pages. And sometimes these people weren't writers. They were just women in my life who I knew, who knew the stories of those who'd walked before them, like my grandmother, and understood the value of continuing to tell and tell and tell and tell. And to tell me, that's your job. Your job is to do nothing but tell. Truth teller. Shapeshifter in your truth telling. Because sometimes you have to shape shift in order to tell the truth to a multitude of people.
Right.
You know, you can't always be that voice for the people you talked to yesterday. You might have to shape shift to be that same truth for your tomorrow, Tuesday's audience.
That's right.
And I think part of that comes from growing up in the rural South. Growing up in the rural South, understanding the codes of silence, the language of silence, things that are lost in translation in silence, because people are afraid of the silence, and how silence is what governed our lives during Reconstruction, during the Civil Rights Movement, and most definitely now. You know, we were talking a little while ago about the strife of Black people in Durham. And I think it is fear. I think it is fear. I think it is the lack of understanding of how you trust. Sometimes we have to be quiet. Sometimes we just have to trust that no language is the language. That sometimes the statement that's required is the absence of speaking. And that too is a narrative. And it's sad to see the internal power plays and the internal, how we've internalized self-hate and unworthiness, how we've allowed a culture to define certain countenances that should be an 8.
Right.
And we've lost them.
I feel like oftentimes people who identify as being women absorb so much of that. Like this fiery, fearful energy gets pulled inside of our bodies. And I really appreciated you reminding us at North Star when you did church. And you said to us, we have medicine inside our bodies that is, you said it was dark and thick like blood. And I just, like, I felt like you snatched, I feel like you snatched all the air out of my body when you said that. I was like, oh.
And people reject and run from their own medicine. You know, there's so much disease because of our dis-ease with living. We've forgotten how to be alive. We live in a culture that's so socially, culturally, politically toxic. And yeah, I think women, when I think of women to me, we're like the ground that everybody needs to stand on. And I didn't say step on. That everybody needs to stand on. We hold it up. We hold up entire universes. And that's when we talk about self-care is such a buzz now. Everybody wants to talk about self-care, but we're still not stepping into self-care. Because if we were really stepping into self-care and understanding how to be still, because life is about being and not doing all the time, we would be healthier.
Yeah.
Our medicine would be free. Our medicine would be flowing. Even I look at all of the new age healers now, they're so expensive.
They are.
And true healers don't charge money. They accept gifts.
Right. It's an energetic exchange.
Energetic exchange. It's a bartering process sometimes.
Yeah.
I was talking to a sister the other day, and she had this amazing painter, and I'm not going to mention the famous artist. I mean, this is like multi-million-dollar painting right now, and I was like, "Is that real?" And she was like, "Yeah." And she said, "It's a long story and a long process of doing work with this person and bartering, and bartering." So we've forgotten that we are a people of a multitude of currencies.
Yes.
We have so much currency that we don't use. And when we do use it, we tend to bankrupt ourselves. Spiritually, emotionally, even physically, when I look at what we're holding in our bodies. How we're burying our children. We're burying our communities. The medicine is getting buried too.
Yeah. There was a post I read last week. There are folk who have been exploring marine mammals and what we can learn from them. And I saw a post last week. It was either Alexis or Adrienne Marie Brown. I don't remember if it was Alexis Pauline Gumbs or Adrienne, but they were talking about a particular dolphin that's native to the coast of North Carolina that created a dorsal fin to stabilize itself.
Right.
Like it wasn't something, we talk about the evolutionary destiny of different creatures or species, and if you go back and you look at the fossils and you say, oh, well, there was evidence that this bump that became a dorsal fin was already there in their cartilage and that somehow it evolved. This dolphin shapeshifted to create stability and I think and survival. And I feel like women, we have the ability to shapeshift, and we often shapeshift.
It's a universe of knowledge. But how many of us are really tapping into the natural world? How many of us go to the ocean anymore? How many of us can hear the cry of a sea mammal? I mean, I know it's a cry. How many of us have ever communed in the natural world? We see the natural world teaching us how to survive over and over again. When we see insects that are chameleons, you go to touch the leaf and something moves because it is the exact same color. I mean, this summer and last summer, I encountered so many bugs and insects that I had never seen before in my life. And some of them were kind of weird looking. And I'm like, some of them is like, are you real? Are you some bio-manufactured experiment? But yeah, the natural world, going into the wilderness and stripping. Because the wilderness is a place of vulnerability. Yeah. It's a place where everything is shedding its skins all the time.
Where are the places that you feel like you shed your skin? Different points in your life.
It's places where I feel safe to be vulnerable. That has not always been with my sisters. That has not always been with male partners or husbands. It's always been with my children. It's always been with mothers and grandmothers.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?